What if the fate of millions was decided by a dying man's secret and a lawyer who'd never set foot in the country he was tearing apart? The truth behind history's deadliest border is darker. What is the truth about the lawyer who killed a million? In the late summer of 1947, the stroke of a single pen triggered a bloodbath so vast it defies human comprehension. But who was holding that pen? The story of the Radcliffe Line is not just a tale of map-making. It is the chronicle of an empire's desperate, reckless exit, leaving behind a fractured subcontinent and a legacy of unimaginable slaughter. To understand how one man's legal brief became a death warrant for over 1 million souls, we must first look at the illusion of victory. How did the long-awaited triumph of Indian independence instantly mutate into the largest and fastest mass migration in recorded human history? Why did freedom arrive soaked in the blood of the very people it was meant to liberate? In August 1947, freedom from British rule was finally realized, but it came with a devastating catch. The subcontinent was being ripped in two. Between August and November, 14 to 15 million people were violently uprooted. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs found themselves on the wrong side of an invisible line, forced to abandon their ancestral homes in a desperate scramble for survival. Was this catastrophic division always the destined outcome for a free India? Did the British and the local political leaders always plan to carve the jewel of the empire into separate, hostile nations? Surprisingly, no. As late as the summer of 1946, partition was not the official plan. The British cabinet mission had actually proposed a united India, a delicate federation that was initially accepted by both the Indian National Congress and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the All India Muslim League. A unified, independent subcontinent was agonizingly close to becoming a reality. If a united India was agreed upon just months earlier, what violently derailed the plan and forced the sudden, catastrophic pivot toward a divided subcontinent? What shattered the fragile political consensus? Deep-seated distrust and political maneuvering swiftly poisoned the agreement. Communal riots erupted in Calcutta, spilling blood into the streets and hardening political stances. Convinced that Muslims would be marginalized in a Hindu majority state, Jinnah aggressively pivoted, demanding a sovereign Pakistan. The political deadlock became absolute, forcing the exhausted British Empire to seek a drastic, permanent exit strategy. But what monumental secret was the founding father of Pakistan hiding behind closed doors? A secret so explosive that it could have entirely altered the trajectory of the partition had the British or Indian leaders discovered it. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was secretly dying. His lungs were being ravaged by advanced tuberculosis. His doctors knew he had only months to live, a terminal diagnosis he concealed with ruthless discipline. Had the British Viceroy or the Congress leadership known that the chief architect of Pakistan was on his deathbed, they likely would have delayed the negotiations, potentially avoiding partition altogether. Oblivious to Jinnah's ticking biological clock, how did the newly appointed British Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, react to the overwhelming pressure and the escalating chaos threatening to consume the subcontinent? Mountbatten made a rash, unilateral decision that guaranteed utter catastrophe. Originally, the British departure was scheduled for June 1948, allowing 15 months for a structured transition. Instead, eager to cut British losses and escape the volatile quagmire, Mountbatten arbitrarily slashed the timeline. He advanced the date of independence to August 15, 1947, leaving a completely inadequate 10 weeks to divide a massive nation. With only 10 weeks to dismantle an empire, partition a military, and draw a border separating 88 million people, who could possibly be trusted to execute such an impossible and highly volatile task? The Indian political leaders were deadlocked, unable to agree on a local figure who wouldn't favor one religious group over another. They needed a neutral arbiter, someone completely detached from the deep-rooted emotional and historical ties of the land. The British government decided the only solution was to import an outsider, a legal line who could approach the division as a sterile, bureaucratic exercise. Who was the man summoned to London, handed a map, and tasked with carving up the lives of millions, despite having absolutely no background in cartography, geography, or South Asian demography? They chose Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a brilliant London barrister who had never been further east than Gibraltar. He had never set foot in India. Yet his absolute ignorance of Indian culture, geography, and religious complexities was bizarrely considered his greatest qualification. He was viewed as completely impartial simply because he knew absolutely nothing about the 175,000 square miles of territory he was about to irreparably shatter. What is the truth about the lawyer who killed a million, drawing the infamous Radcliffe Line of 1947? When Cyril Radcliffe stepped off the plane in New Delhi, he faced a ticking clock that would seal the fate of millions. He had exactly 36 days to carve a subcontinent in two. Despite his absolute ignorance of the land, the British Empire handed him a pen and an impossible deadline. But the true horror wasn't just the lack of time. It was the lethal methodology he employed to decide who belonged to India and who belonged to Pakistan. With only 5 weeks to divide 88 million people across 175,000 square miles, how did Radcliffe actually determine where the new borders should fall? Did he walk the land to understand the communities? He never once surveyed the terrain. Complaining that the Indian summer was simply too hot for fieldwork, Radcliffe remained isolated indoors. Instead of examining the complex reality on the ground, he relied entirely on outdated 6-year-old census data. He treated living, breathing communities as mere statistics on paper, completely blind to the cultural and geographic nuances of the regions he was tearing apart. What happens when a man with absolutely no cartography experience draws international borders from the comfort of a desk, using obsolete numbers to blindly dictate the future of millions of lives across a vast, highly populated landscape? The results were geographically absurd and deeply catastrophic. Radcliffe's arbitrary strokes of the pen sliced blindly through the heart of the Punjab and Bengal. His unyielding lines severed ancient irrigation canals, split railway networks in half, and quite literally ran through the middle of individual homes, leading families with their kitchen in one country and their bedroom in a hostile, newly forged nation. As the arbitrary deadline of August 15th arrived, Lord Mountbatten officially declared independence. But how could millions of citizens celebrate their newfound freedom when the actual borders hadn't even been publicly announced yet? They celebrated in a state of perilous ignorance. On Independence Day, millions of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs rejoiced, completely unaware that Radcliffe's secret lines had already stranded them on the wrong side of the border. When the maps were finally published days later, the joy instantly evaporated. Overnight, families realized their ancestral homes were now located deep inside enemy territory. Once the terrifying reality of the new borders set in, how did these trapped populations react to finding themselves suddenly declared unwanted foreigners, surrounded by hostile majorities in the very homeland they had lived in for generations? It triggered an explosion of panic, resulting in the largest and fastest mass migration in recorded human history. Between 14 and 15 million people were violently uprooted. Desperate refugees formed caravans stretching for dozens of miles, abandoning everything they owned to flee across the new borders. But this unprecedented exodus quickly devolved into a gauntlet of slaughter as communal violence erupted along the routes. As millions clogged the roads and railways, desperately trying to reach safety, how deadly did this chaotic, unprotected migration become for the vulnerable men, women, and children caught in the vicious, escalating crossfire of partition? The brutality defied comprehension. Trains arriving at major stations were horrifyingly dubbed ghost trains, rolling in completely silent because every single passenger had been slaughtered en route. In one incident at Kamoke Station, an organized mob massacred over 3,000 refugees. The British initially claimed only 200,000 died, a figure historians now believe was intentionally deflated to mask their monumental failure. When the dust finally settled on the British Empire's hasty retreat, what was the ultimate, devastating truth about the lawyer who killed 1 million, and the grim legacy of his 36-day cartographic assignment? Sir Cyril Radcliffe, the man who drew the border that killed an estimated 1 million people in 1947, had never visited India and relied on 6-year-old census data to divide 88 million people in just 36 days. Tasked with partitioning the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, Radcliffe's arbitrary lines severed homes, railways, and canals, sparking the largest mass migration in human history. He was so horrified by the resulting bloodshed that he burned all his papers, refused his payment, and died having never publicly discussed his role in the catastrophe. What is the truth about the lawyer who killed 1 million, the Radcliffe Line, 1947? How did a single stroke of a pen from a man thousands of miles away shatter an entire subcontinent overnight? Behind the staggering death toll lies a chilling story of imperial arrogance and desperate haste. A lone British barrister, armed with nothing but outdated maps, was handed the impossible task of carving up an empire. The resulting chaos wasn't an accident, it was a guaranteed catastrophe, orchestrated by an empire in retreat. Why was this monumental task, the division of a vast, incredibly diverse population, rushed into a mere matter of weeks, leaving absolutely no room for careful planning or human consideration? The timeline was arbitrarily slashed by the British Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, who abruptly advanced the departure date from June 1948 to August 15, 1947. This reckless decision compressed a complex 15-month transition into just 10 weeks. The chosen border maker was given exactly 36 days to divide 175,000 square miles. With millions of lives hanging in the balance, who was trusted with this godlike power? What kind of expert was selected to navigate the intricate cultural and religious geography of India? The man chosen was Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a brilliant legal mind who had never been further east than Gibraltar. He possessed absolutely no background in cartography, geography, or South Asian demography. Astonishingly, his complete ignorance of Indian culture was viewed by political leaders as his greatest qualification, a supposed guarantee of perfect, blind impartiality. How did a man completely blind to the landscape attempt to draw its borders? Did he travel to the villages and cities that his pen was about to cleave into? He refused to actually look at the land he was dividing, complaining that the Indian summer was simply too hot for field surveys. Confined to a sweltering colonial mansion, Radcliffe relied entirely on 6-year-old census data. Blindly tracing lines on paper, he unknowingly severed ancient communities, splitting individual homes, farms, and vital canal systems right down the middle. When did the 88 million people affected by these arbitrary lines finally learn where the borders fell and what country they now belong to? In a stunning display of negligence, the borders were kept secret until 2 days after independence. On August 15th, millions of people joyously celebrated their freedom, entirely unaware of their true geographic fate. When the maps were finally published, millions woke up to the terrifying realization that they were now trapped in a hostile, foreign country. What happened when these populations realized they were on the wrong side of the newly drawn map? How did they react to being suddenly stranded behind enemy lines? Absolute panic erupted into the largest and fastest mass migration in recorded human history. Between 14 and 15 million people desperately fled their homes. The shattered railways became death traps. Trains arriving at major stations were dubbed ghost trains, rolling in complete silence because they were filled entirely with the corpses of slaughtered passengers. How did the architect of this unprecedented tragedy reckon with the bloodshed he had casually unleashed from his desk? Did he ever face the millions whose lives he destroyed? Sir Cyril Radcliffe, the man who drew the border that killed an estimated 1 million people in 1947, had never visited India and relied on 6-year-old census data to divide 88 million people in just 36 days. Tasked with partitioning the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, Radcliffe's arbitrary lines severed homes, railways, and canals, sparking the largest mass migration in human history. He was so horrified by the resulting bloodshed that he burned all his papers, refused his payment, and died having never publicly discussed his role in the catastrophe. Can the scars of an arbitrary line, drawn in haste by a stranger, ever truly heal? Or does the phantom stroke of that pen still divide the subcontinent today? Decades later, the Radcliffe Line remains one of the most heavily militarized and volatile borders on Earth. The absolute silence of one horrified lawyer left behind a bitter legacy of generational trauma. It stands as a dark testament to the cost of empire, proving that when lines are drawn carelessly on paper, they will inevitably bleed into the soil. We started by asking, the lawyer who killed a million, the Radcliffe Line, 1947. And the answer? Sir Cyril Radcliffe, the man who drew the border that killed an estimated 1 million people in 1947, had never visited India and relied on 6-year-old census data to divide 88 million people in just 36 days. Tasked with partitioning the subcontinent into India and Pakistan, Radcliffe's arbitrary lines severed homes, railways, and canals, sparking the largest mass migration in human history. If this changed how you see things, share it with someone who needs to hear it.